The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon butter rolls drifted through my mother's small Ohio kitchen, mixing with the clatter of silverware and overlapping conversations. It was Thanksgiving, the one holiday that was supposed to bring families together, but as I sat in my wheelchair at the end of the long wooden table, I felt more like an inconvenient piece of furniture than a member of the Monroe family. My right leg twitched with its usual nerve misfires, a reminder of the accident that had shattered my pelvis 10 months earlier. I had learned to manage the pain, the spasms, the limits, but nothing prepared me for the heaviness in the room, the way everyone avoided looking directly at me as if my wheelchair made them uncomfortable. Caleb sat just to my left, my older brother, the person who used to protect me from bullies in school. Today, he would barely look at me, and when he finally did, his eyes were sharp, irritated, already glossed with the dull shine of holiday drinking. As my mother moved around the table asking everyone to join hands and bow their heads, Caleb leaned close enough that I could feel his breath warm against my ear. His whisper was quiet but venomous. "This act needs to stop." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. Before I could respond, everyone around the table lowered their heads for the Thanksgiving prayer. Mine stayed upright. I was too stunned to move, too startled to inhale. I watched Caleb, his jaw flexed like he was holding back something ugly. My mother's voice trembled through the traditional blessing, her words floating through the room with forced cheer. As she reached the final line of grace, everything around me seemed to slow down. Chairs creaked, forks tapped the edges of plates. A baby whined somewhere in the living room, and under the table, sudden and violent, I felt the sharp pressure of something hard jabbing into my thigh. Not a deep stab, but a purposeful, cruel, piercing shove. The shock hit before the pain. The sensation was unmistakable. Caleb had taken the small wooden carving knife from the breadboard and pushed it hard into my leg. I gasped so loudly it cut straight through the end of my mother's prayer. Instantly, burning nerve pain shot across my thigh, then down to my knee like a bolt of lightning. My right leg jerked uncontrollably, struck the underside of the table, and sent a ripple of vibrations along the dishes. I felt the wheelchair tilt slightly. My muscles seized, my breath collapsed in my chest. Then, everything happened at once. My hands slipped against the armrests. My balance gave out. My body toppled sideways out of the chair. My hip slammed into the hardwood floor first, then my shoulder, then the side of my head. The thud echoed through the dining room. The room froze. A few forks clattered back onto plates. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered a quiet, "Lord have mercy." I heard one of my cousins near the hallway whisper, "Not again." Caleb shot to his feet like he had been the one wronged. His chair screeched backward against the floor. "Everyone stop pretending you do not see this. She has been playing the sympathy game all year." His voice was loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. I tried to roll onto my back, but the pain was a tidal wave crashing again and again against my pelvis. Every breath came sharp and short. My vision blurred. My fingers trembled against the floor. I heard someone in the far corner whisper, "Maybe she slipped." Caleb barked a bitter laugh. "Slipped. Sure. Convenient timing." He pointed at me like he was presenting evidence to a courtroom. "She can stand when she wants to. She can move when it suits her. Stop pretending for sympathy." His words sliced sharper than the knife he had shoved into me. I looked toward my mother. She stood at the far end of the table with a dish towel in her hand, frozen in place. Her eyes wide and frightened, but she did not move. She did not defend me. She did not say a word. Chairs shifted as relatives pulled back slightly to avoid looking at me directly. No one came to help. Not a single person. I could feel the warm sting of tears gathering in the corners of my eyes, blurring my view of the chandelier above. The glass bulbs flickered slightly, or maybe my vision was shaking too hard to tell. The pain in my leg radiated outward in hot, pulsing waves. My thigh throbbed. My hip screamed. Every nerve felt like it was sparking uncontrollably. I tried to breathe through it, slow and steady like I used to coach my patients to do, but nothing worked. My body refused to cooperate. Footsteps shuffled around me. Someone whispered, "I think she is faking again." Another voice said she did this last Easter. Caleb crouched down beside me, not to help, but to loom. His face hovered inches above mine, flushed from anger and drink. "Say something. Admit it. Tell everyone the truth." I swallowed hard. My voice cracked. "Caleb, please." He leaned even closer. "Stop pretending." My breath hitched, my vision blurred. My fingers curled into the grooves of the floorboards. And as I stared up at the swaying chandelier above me, the world tilted and twisted in soft, blurry waves. I lay there on the cold hardwood, the noise of my family fading in and out, the humiliation sinking deeper than the pain, and all I could think was, this is my family. This is supposed to be home. This is supposed to be Thanksgiving. But all I felt was fear. All I felt was betrayal. The hardwood floor felt colder with every passing second as I lay there struggling to steady my breath against the waves of burning pain that pulsed through my right leg. It was the kind of pain I used to hear my patients describe in the ER when they talked about nerve flares, the kind that felt like electric currents searing through flesh. Now I understood them in a way I never wanted to. A sharp shooting sensation fired from my hip and streaked downward to my knee, branching into smaller stabbing needles along the side of my thigh. Every nerve felt alive and screaming. I tried to curl my leg closer to my body, some instinctive attempt to protect the injury, but the muscles refused to obey. They twitched instead, jerking uncontrollably, sending a new wave of agony up my spine. My breath caught. The ceiling above me tilted slightly, the chandelier swimming out of focus as my eyes filled with tears I fought to hold back. I felt the room around me shift, not because anyone moved toward me, but because they shuffled away. I could hear the scrape of chairs sliding across the floor, the weight of dozens of eyes pressed down, not with concern, but with judgment. My cousin Marlene whispered to the woman beside her, "I told you she always makes a scene." The whisper was not as quiet as she thought. I felt it land like a slap across my face. I blinked hard, trying to refocus, but the pain kept blurring everything. This was nerve pain. Not a bruise, not a simple cut, not something you could walk off or breathe away. This was the kind of burning, stabbing fire that radiated deep beneath the skin, the kind that no amount of willpower could silence. As a former physical therapist, I knew exactly what was happening. I knew the signs of nerve aggravation. I knew the sensations. I knew the consequences. And the humiliation of understanding my own injury in real time made everything worse. I tried to shift my weight to sit up, bracing my palm against the floor, but even my hand trembled weak and unsteady. I pushed harder. My elbow buckled. My body sagged sideways. A soft groan escaped before I could stop it. No one rushed in to help. Not one relative bent down. Not even my mother, who still stood at the far end of the table gripping a dish towel like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was pale, but her feet remained planted. Fear was there, but so was guilt, and behind both was something that hurt more than the nerve pain itself: indecision. My nephew, barely 6 years old, peeked around the table leg, then laughed suddenly as he mimicked the way my leg jerked a moment earlier. He lifted his own leg and kicked it outward in a mock spasm. His mother smacked his arm lightly. "Do not do that, Tyler." But the reprimand was weak and half-hearted, and the boy only shrugged before running off. Watching him imitate my suffering so casually made something inside me crack. I swallowed hard, biting down on the rising sob. Another cousin older, probably in his 40s, pulled out his phone and began recording. He held it high like he was documenting something amusing or scandalous for the family group chat. My vision sharpened with outrage for a moment, but the effort was too painful, and another wave of burning agony forced my focus back downward. My wheelchair lay on its side a few feet away, one wheel still spinning lazily in circles. The sight twisted something deep inside me. That wheelchair had been my lifeline for months. My mobility, my independence. Seeing it tipped over like discarded furniture broke my heart in a way I could not explain. I wanted to reach it. I wanted to pull myself back into it, regain even a shred of dignity. But the pain held me prisoner on the floor. I lifted my hand again, fighting the tremors pressing my palm flat against the cold wood. My arm shook violently with the effort, but I forced myself upright an inch, maybe two, before a lightning bolt of pain shot up my thigh, twisting my stomach into knots. I gasped and collapsed back down. Someone behind me muttered, "She is doing too much." If she really hurt, she would not be moving like that. I felt my chest tighten. How could they look at me shaking on the ground and still choose to believe I was performing something for attention? They had not been there in the hospital when the doctor told me the nerve damage might never fully heal. They had not held my hand while I cried in frustration during the first weeks of physical therapy, when simply shifting from the bed to the toilet brought tears to my eyes. They had no idea what it took to get through each day without collapsing from pain or exhaustion, and yet they still believed they knew more than the surgeons who literally rebuilt my pelvis. My fingers brushed my thigh, gently, feeling the warm swelling near the small puncture where Caleb had shoved the carving knife. It was shallow but direct, enough to anger the already fragile nerves, enough to send my body into chaos, enough to drop me from my wheelchair in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner while everyone watched. My breath hitched in my throat. The air felt thick, like breathing through cotton. My ears buzzed faintly. I could hear the muffled clinks of dishes being moved away, as if people were resuming their meal around me. My humiliation settled deeper. My mother finally took a step forward, but it was hesitant, as if she were debating whether to help me or maintain the illusion of normalcy. Caleb stood over me still, his expression shifting between triumph and irritation. He crossed his arms and shook his head. "See? Look at this. She will do anything to stay the center of attention." The words sliced through me cleanly, leaving no room for defense. I felt my throat tighten again. The pain, the humiliation, the disbelief all blended into a single crushing pressure inside my chest. I blinked up at the blurry lights above. They swayed gently like the room was drifting. My fingers curled in toward my palms. My body trembled with effort. I could not sit up. I could not push myself to the chair. I could not make anyone believe the truth. All I could do was lie there on the hardwood floor, surrounded by people who decided my suffering was a story they could rewrite however they pleased. The room felt smaller as I lay there, my breath shallow, the pain in my leg radiating like a wildfire that refused to burn out. Every nerve buzzed beneath my skin, each spark of agony reminding me that I was no longer the person I had been a year ago. I was fragile in ways I hated admitting vulnerable in front of the very people who should have been my safety net. But instead of support, their voices rose around me like a courtroom prepared to deliver a guilty verdict. Caleb took a slow step back, lifting his chin as if to give the rest of the family permission to speak freely. And they did. Instantly. Loudly. Cruelly. "She walks just fine when people are not looking." My cousin Denise's voice cut across the room with the certainty of someone who had never spent a single day in pain but felt entitled to speak as if she had medical credentials. I heard her but could not see her face clearly through the haze of tears and throbbing nerve pain. Still, I knew that tone. That accusatory, condescending tone she used whenever she wanted to feel superior. A second voice chimed in. "It belongs to Aunt Lacey, who never missed an opportunity to comment on someone else's misfortune. Traumas like hers heal in a few months. My neighbor got hit by a bus and walked a week later." The absurdity of her comparison almost made me laugh, but the pain strangled the reaction in my throat. Someone else muttered she has always been dramatic. Always. As if the months I spent relearning how to transfer from a bed to a wheelchair were performances. As if the nights I cried in frustration in the privacy of my bedroom were scripted scenes. I closed my eyes, my chest heaving shallowly. The worst part was not the voices of my cousins or the ignorance of distant relatives who barely knew me. The worst part was the silence. My mother's silence. She stood by the kitchen counter gripping the dish towel in both hands like it was the only thing tethering her to the floor. Her eyes were wet. Her lips trembling, the indecision etched across her face as clear as daylight. I silently begged her to speak, to say something, to call out the lies, to defend me, to remind my brother that I was her daughter and not some stranger at the dinner table. But she said nothing. Absolutely nothing. The betrayal felt colder than the hardwood floor beneath me. Caleb took another step closer, towering above me like a judge preparing to announce sentencing. He pointed a finger toward my wheelchair still lying on its side. She enjoys the attention. That is what this is, and she is draining Mom's savings. This cannot go on. The word draining echoed around the room as if the walls themselves were repeating it. My stomach twisted. That was not true. My insurance covered most of my surgery. I paid for my own wheelchair. I bought the medical equipment I needed. I used my savings. I used everything I had left. My mother had helped only with groceries during the weeks I could not drive. But in Caleb's mind, any help was too much help. And now he was planting that idea into the heads of everyone around us. A few relatives nodded slowly, letting the idea settle in. My cousin Brian scoffed loudly. Really makes you wonder, does it not? Her being a physical therapist and then suddenly unable to walk? Maybe there is more to the story. I blinked hard, trying to keep my vision from tilting. My heart pounded against my ribs. I tried again to push myself into a sitting position, but the nerve pain flared violently down my leg and I collapsed back against the floor. A defeated sound escaped my throat before I could swallow it back. Denise folded her arms. If she can move like that, she can walk. I forced the words out through clenched teeth. That is nerve misfire. That is not control. They ignored me as if my voice barely had volume. Caleb crouched slightly, staring at me with a mix of frustration and disgust. Say it. Admit you do not need the chair. I stared back at him through tears blurring the edges of my vision. My voice shook. I do need it. You know I need it. My brother laughed. The sound was cruel in a way I had never heard from him before. He stood back up and looked around the room, addressing our relatives like he was presenting a case. She has been milking this for nearly a year now. Mom runs around doing everything for her, cooking for her, driving her, paying her bills. The words felt like blows to my chest. I wanted to scream that it was not true, that he was twisting the narrative into some grotesque version of reality that made him look like the victim. But my throat closed. My breath hitched. My heart pounded. And no one looked at me for the truth. They looked to him. Always him. He was the charismatic one, the loud one, the confident one. I was the broken one. A soft clatter echoed near the table. Someone set a glass down too hard. The tension in the room thickened. My mother finally took a step forward. I thought she might finally defend me, finally call out the cruelty happening right in front of her. But instead, she whispered barely audible, "Caleb, maybe we should sit down." It was not defense. It was an attempt to de-escalate without actually acknowledging the truth. My heart cracked. Caleb shook his head. No, someone needs to say it. Rachel, you are ruining this family. You are ruining Thanksgiving. The pain in my leg pulsed so hard it matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. I pressed my trembling fingers into the floor as if grounding myself could make any of this stop. My vision blurred again. The chandelier above me spun slightly. I felt faint and small and trapped beneath the weight of their judgment. This was my family, my own blood, and somehow they saw me as a burden more than a person, a problem more than a daughter, an inconvenience more than someone who was hurting. The realization sat heavily in my lungs, crushing, cold, final. The room had settled into a cold, buzzing tension, the kind that made the air feel heavier with every passing second, as if judgment itself had mass. I could feel their stares pressing into my skin more sharply than the stabbing pain in my leg. I sucked in a shaky breath and tried to shift my weight again, but the moment my fingers pushed against the floor, a jolt of burning nerve fire shot up my thigh. My arm buckled. I collapsed again. A soft, involuntary cry escaped my throat. Instead of empathy, murmurs spread. Caleb let out a loud, exasperated sigh, as though he had been tolerating an inconvenience for far too long. He stepped past my wheelchair, lying helplessly on its side, and reached down, not to help me up, but to dig into my tote bag. My heart seized. "Caleb, stop." He ignored me. hands rummaging, digging deeper until he pulled out the one thing I never imagined he would violate: my disability card. He held it up like a trophy. A tiny piece of plastic meant to protect me and give me access to what I needed suddenly turned into ammunition in his hands. Look at this. He waved it around, letting each relative get a good look. A disability card for someone perfectly capable of walking. The ignorance in his voice stung nearly as sharply as the pain shooting through my leg. A few relatives leaned in, squinting at the card, as though trying to decipher a hidden code. My Aunt Lacey gasped theatrically. "You mean she is officially disabled?" "Since when?" Brian scoffed. "Since she realized being helpless comes with perks." I felt the humiliation burn through my nerves like acid. My voice trembled as I forced out the words. "Caleb, give it back, please." But he held it higher, almost smiling now, emboldened by the crowd feeding off his cruelty. He turned to my mother. "Mom, do you know she gets priority parking, free transportation services, and extra benefits?" My mother's face tightened, a flicker of shame crossing her expression, even though she knew none of that was true. She whispered weakly, "Caleb, not now," but he ignored her completely. A cousin named Drew stood up, adjusting his belt like he was preparing for some self-appointed duty. "Someone should call Social Security and report her. That is fraud, plain and simple. Fraud." The word sliced through the room like a blade. Fraud. As if my months of agony, my nights crying from the nerve spasms, my inability to stand without trembling, could be dismissed with a single label. Caleb crouched halfway to my level, that same cruel smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. His voice dropped to a low whisper meant only for me. "You are dragging the whole family down with this act, and you know it." My breaths grew shorter, faster, shakier. My chest tightened so much I could barely speak. "It is not an act." He tilted his head, feigning innocence. "Oh, really? Then why can you move now?" "You pushed yourself earlier." You reached for the chair. Someone behind him shouted, "If she can reach and twist like that, her leg works." The words, so confident and so wrong, made my skin crawl. I forced myself to speak through clenched teeth. "Nerve misfire is not muscle control. My leg is numb. I cannot stand." Caleb let out a cruel laugh. "Convenient." His mocking tone sparked more muttering among the relatives. A few shook their heads. Another cousin rolled her eyes dramatically. The collective dismissal hit me harder than the fall itself. It was as if the entire room had decided who I was without any regard for truth science or the pain ripping through my body. Caleb leaned closer again, his breath warm, but his words ice cold. "You are ruining Thanksgiving again." That word "again" hit like a fist to my ribs. A stain, a pattern, a burden. Suddenly, my Uncle Damon slapped his hand on the table. I knew something was off. She miraculously becomes helpless every holiday, every family gathering. My pulse quickened. That is not true. I have been in physical therapy for 8 months. I have medical documentation. They talked over me, loudly, aggressively, a chorus of voices drowning out mine. "Look at her. She is trying to play sick to get out of helping." I saw her walking last March. She got up from a chair without help at Melissa's baby shower. Someone should make her stand now, prove it. The noise swelled into something chaotic and cruel. A mob mentality, a wildfire that needed no spark other than the shared belief that disabled people cannot possibly be telling the truth about their bodies. My voice cracked as I tried again. "I cannot feel my leg." Caleb straightened and raised his voice. "Really?" Then how did she pull away when I tried touching her earlier? I stared at him, stunned. He was twisting everything, every reflex, every involuntary movement, every tremor, every spasm, a complete distortion of the truth. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the room anymore. I saw mouths moving. I heard accusations, bits and pieces cutting through the ringing in my ears. She is manipulating Mom. She is making herself the victim. She is embarrassing the family. She is lying. She is lying. She is lying. Someone nudged my overturned wheelchair with their foot like it was a prop in some dramatic performance. Caleb leaned down one last time, eyes sharp with something dark and self-righteous. This ends tonight. The room agreed. Nods, murmurs, disgusted sighs. No one knelt beside me. No one defended me. No one tried to help. They stood above me like spectators watching a public trial, and I was the only one without a voice. The room pulsed with a rising heat that had nothing to do with the oven still humming in the kitchen or the candles flickering on the dining table. It came from the voices layering over each other the way a storm gathers wind before unleashing chaos. I lay on the hardwood floor in the center of it, my breathing shallow and uneven, watching my family shift from individuals into something collective and dangerous, something that fed on each other's anger and suspicion. Caleb stood tall above me, gripping my disability card like a symbol of victory, and with every second he held it up, the room grew more electric with hostility. Denise took a shaky step forward, her breath thick with wine. If she can twitch her leg like that, she can stand. A cousin across the room snapped their fingers. Exactly! Look at her! She is not paralyzed. A man I barely recognized, someone married into the family, leaned in closer with narrowed eyes. When my coworker hurt his back, he still went to work every day. Pain is part of life. It does not excuse this drama. That word, drama, stung sharply. A woman holding a toddler set the child down, whispering something in his ear. He giggled, then bent his knee sharply, mimicking my earlier involuntary spasm. The people beside him laughed, at the spasms that kept me awake at night, at the nerve pain that felt like hot metal under my skin. My chest tightened again, my breaths fast and uneven on the verge of hyperventilation. I forced myself to focus on the ceiling light above me, but the shadows around its edges swayed my vision, tinted with the beginnings of panic. Someone else stepped forward, the man who had been drinking bourbon since noon. His voice was loud, slurred, aggressive. If she can jerk her leg like that, she can damn well walk. He pointed at me with the confidence of someone who needed no evidence beyond his own uninformed opinion. I wanted to scream. Instead, only a strained whisper escaped. That is not how nerve damage works. He waved me off. You are not fooling anybody. The crowd murmured louder, and louder, and louder. Their voices swirled together like smoke, thickening the air, making it harder to breathe. Another cousin pulled out her phone, clearly live streaming. She held it up high, focusing the camera on my broken body on the floor. I heard her mutter, "People need to see this." I tried to reach for my fallen wheelchair again, but my right arm trembled so violently that the effort died halfway. My fingers clawed at the floor, helpless. Damon snorted from across the room. She twitches and wiggles all over the ground, but claims she cannot get up. This is ridiculous. Someone in the back chimed in. Maybe she wants Caleb arrested so she can play victim again. The word again spiked my heart rate like a jolt of electricity. My throat tightened. My body curled slightly inward, each breath catching. This felt unreal, like some warped theater performance I had been forced into without a script, surrounded by an audience that refused to see the truth, even when it trembled painfully in front of them. Caleb took a step toward me. His confidence was disgusting. He knelt halfway down, close enough that I could see the anger burning behind his eyes. Then he reached toward my injured leg. Panic jolted my body. No, do not touch me. But he gripped my knee anyway. His fingers pressed into the bruised tissue, and white-hot pain exploded from the point of contact like a shockwave. A scream tore from my throat. I could not control it. My whole body jerked away, spasming. Caleb whipped around triumphantly, addressing the room. See? Reflexes. Her nerves work just fine. The room erupted. A roar of agreement. A chorus of misguided certainty. She is lying. She is making excuses. She is manipulating all of us. She never stopped playing this game. It was unbelievable. The logic was twisted impossible, but they embraced it anyway because it gave them permission to believe something easier than the truth. Easier than accepting someone else's pain. Easier than dealing with responsibility. My chest constricted painfully. I shook my head, tears blurring the shapes of the people towering above me. Please, stop. But they were not listening. They were not even trying. A cousin, holding a half-empty beer can, suddenly stepped forward, towering over me with a mocking scowl. "Let her stand. If she stands, this is over. This is the proof." That was not proof. That was cruelty disguised as logic. Caleb nodded emphatically. "Let her try. She can do it. She has just been dragging this out." Another voice rose. "Make her show us, now." I pushed my hand against the floor again, breath-shaking tears streaming uncontrollably. My arm buckled. My core muscles trembled violently. My leg burned from calf to hip, a firestorm raging downhill. I could not even lift myself halfway. My face pressed against the wood again as exhaustion overtook me. I heard someone scoff. "Look at that pathetic performance." Someone else. "She is playing helpless." I wanted to scream. I wanted to vanish. I wanted the floor to open and swallow me whole. This was no longer a family. This was a mob, a merciless, unthinking mob, and I was trapped in the center of it, powerless, unheard, drowning under accusations that cut deeper than any injury ever had. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. My pulse roared in my ears. The room spun slightly. The voices grew louder again, rising like a storm ready to break. And then the cruelest comment of the night sliced through the noise. "Maybe she needs to fall harder to tell the truth." A collective gasp rippled, but no one corrected him. No one defended me. No one protected me. They just stood there letting the words hang in the air as if they were a fair suggestion. My vision dimmed at the edges. My body trembled violently. This was the moment I realized my family had stopped seeing me as human. The room had become a blur of distorted faces and echoing voices, each accusation slicing into me with a precision that felt almost surgical. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs, fast and unsteady, like it was trying to escape my chest. The nerve pain spiraled down my leg in relentless burning waves, but now something else had entered the mix. Something colder and heavier. A crushing realization. I was alone. Truly, terrifyingly alone. My fingers trembled as I pressed them against the hardwood floor, trying desperately to push myself upright, but my elbow buckled again. I dropped back down, cheek brushing the cold surface. A wave of nausea rolled through me. The pain was overwhelming, but the humiliation was worse, burrowing into places even the nerve damage had not reached. I tried to breathe slowly in through the nose, out through the mouth. It was what I used to tell my patients. Ground yourself. Control the breath. But tonight, nothing felt controllable. My breath came in ragged spurts. My head spun. The chandelier above me blurred into a glowing smear. Somewhere in the haze, Caleb's voice cut through like a jagged edge. "She always does this. Every holiday. Every family gathering." The words bounced around inside my skull, triggering a memory I had fought hard to bury. The screech of metal, the stench of burnt rubber, the sudden bone-shaking impact. I was back in my car, back on the 2-lane highway outside Columbus, back in the moment when the pickup truck lost control on black ice and crashed into the driver's side of my vehicle. I heard the sickening crunch again, the scream of twisted steel, the shattering glass raining across my lap. Then the worst part, the impossible difficulty of breathing, the way the seatbelt dug into my chest, the terrifying attempt to move my left leg and feeling nothing. Then pain, a hot, blinding, burning pain exploding through my pelvis and down my thigh. I remembered the paramedic's voice, firm but urgent. "Stay with me. Do not pass out. We are almost there." I remembered the surgeon's quiet explanation later when the world finally stopped spinning. The nerves in your pelvis suffered significant trauma. Some may not recover. We reconstructed what we could, but mobility may be unpredictable. Nerve death, chronic flare-ups, limited weight bearing, long-term impact unknown. That memory, unwelcome and sharp, collided with the present where I lay on the floor while my own family denied everything those doctors had fought to explain. My stomach twisted again. I blinked hard, trying to pull myself back to the present, but the room tilted dangerously. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, close to fainting. Someone's voice rose above the others. "Just pull her up! Force her to stand!" My breath hitched. Panic surged. "No, no, please." But my voice came out so soft it barely existed. Caleb moved toward me again, that familiar mix of irritation and self-righteousness carved into his features. He reached for my arm, grabbing it roughly. Instinct took over, and my body jerked away, not from strength, but from reflexive fear. Pain ripped through my hips so violently that for a moment I could not breathe at all. A strangled sound escaped my lips. Caleb scoffed loudly. "Look at her. She pulls away just fine." I closed my eyes tightly, tears leaking out against my will. My chest tightened as the panic swelled, suffocating and merciless. A ringing filled my ears. The room felt like it was shrinking walls bending inward, squeezing me. I tried again to breathe deeply, but the breaths came too fast, too shallow. My hands tingled, my fingers curled involuntarily. I was spiraling, and no one noticed, no one cared. Instead, they kept going. She is doing this for attention. She needs consequences. If she really cannot walk, why is she fighting? She is lying. She is manipulating Mom. She has no respect for this family. Each word chipped away at the last pieces of strength I had left. I felt myself folding inward, my spirit collapsing under the weight of their voices, their disbelief, their cruelty. All the months of therapy, all the pain I endured in silence, all the progress I fought for, suddenly felt meaningless. They refused to see me. They refused to believe me. They refused to acknowledge even the possibility that my suffering was real. The betrayal hit me harder than the accident ever had. Blood still pumped, bones healed. But this was deeper, more permanent. I opened my eyes again, trying to focus on something, anything to stay grounded. My overturned wheelchair came into view, the wheels still rocking slightly from where someone had nudged it with their foot earlier. That sight made my throat tighten painfully. That chair represented months of struggle. It represented independence I had fought tooth and nail to keep. Seeing it treated like a piece of trash made something inside me snap. A fresh wave of tears blurred my vision. The ringing in my ears grew louder. My breath sped up again. Too fast. Too shallow. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible fist. I could not get enough air. I was hyperventilating, I knew that, but I could not stop it. "Please, stop. Please." My voice cracked apart. No one heard me. Or maybe they heard me and simply did not care. Caleb's voice rose again, triumphant and wild. "We are done playing this game. Stand up or admit the truth." Something inside me broke then. The part of me that still believed that family meant protection. The part of me that believed blood meant loyalty. The part of me that believed love could outweigh cruelty. Gone. Completely gone. I stared at the ceiling vision dimming at the edges, my breath thin as paper, my body shaking uncontrollably. My mind drifted in and out, flashes of memory folding into the present, as if my brain could not separate the trauma of the past from the trauma unfolding in front of me now. I felt myself slipping, fading, collapsing inward in a way I feared I might never recover from. And in that devastating silence between heartbeats, one terrifying truth crystallized inside me. My family did not break me that night. They revealed how broken they already were. The room felt like it was collapsing inward, every voice pressing against my skull, every accusation tightening around my chest like a vice. My vision blurred at the edges, and I could barely tell whether the chandelier above me was flickering or if my eyes were simply struggling to stay open. The hardwood floor beneath me seemed to tilt my nerves, caught between burning agony and a terrifying numbness. My breaths came fast, shallow, almost desperate. Then, in the middle of that rising chaos, something shifted. It was small at first, almost unnoticeable. A faint sound coming from the entryway barely louder than the ringing in my ears. A gentle click. Another. Then the unmistakable creak of the front door opening. Conversations faltered. A few heads turned. My mother stiffened her grip on the dish towel, tightening as though bracing for impact. Caleb continued ranting above me, waving my disability card like a prosecutor presenting evidence, but even he paused momentarily, annoyed by the sudden distraction. The room, buzzing with cruelty only seconds before, dimmed into a low hum. Then a voice cut through the tension, firm, controlled, and startlingly calm. "Rachel, what on earth happened?" The sound of my name, spoken with genuine concern, sliced through the fog in my mind. I turned my head slowly toward the doorway, and there she was. Dr. Elena Warren stood framed in the entrance, her winter coat still on snowflakes melting on the shoulders, her dark hair pulled back in a simple low bun. Her expression was a mixture of disbelief and an icy fury I had never seen directed at anyone before. Next to her stood her husband, Andrew Warren, an off-duty patrol officer still wearing his department jacket, eyes scanning the room with sharp, trained focus. Dr. Warren took one look at me lying on the floor and froze, not with hesitation, but with the kind of stillness that precedes an explosion, the kind of stillness that meant something serious was about to happen. The room went dead silent. Caleb's hand, still raised mid-gesture, slowly lowered. My mother brought a trembling hand to her mouth. A cousin whispered, "Oh no!" Dr. Warren stepped forward, her footsteps crisp and echoing through the stunned silence. Every relative instinctively parted for her, creating a narrow path, as though she were Moses cutting through the sea of judgmental onlookers. When she reached me, she knelt beside my body without hesitation, placing a steadying hand near my shoulder without touching the injured side. Her eyes swept over me sharp and assessing, taking in the uneven breaths, the trembling limbs, the swollen area on my thigh where the knife had punctured. Then her gaze lifted and she looked around the room with a cold intensity that made nearly every person shift uncomfortably. Who touched her? It was not a question. It was an accusation wrapped inside a demand. Caleb swallowed hard and pointed at me as if that would somehow protect him. She fell. "She is pretending again. You do not know the whole story." Warren's eyes snapped to him, freezing him mid-sentence. Pretending. Her voice was quiet, but the edge in it could cut glass. Andrew stepped forward, his posture upright, his presence commanding without raising his voice. "Pretending does not cause puncture wounds or nerve flare collapse. Show me your hands." Caleb stuttered, his confidence evaporating. "Why?" "Because you were the closest to her and someone clearly hurt her." "Let me see your hands." Andrew's tone was calm, but even I could hear the underlying authority in it. Caleb's jaw clenched. He tried to deflect. "She is manipulating everyone again. She wants sympathy." Dr. Warren snapped enough with a sharpness that silenced the entire room. Her voice shook with furious restraint. "I told Rachel I would stop by tonight because she was nervous to be here. And now I walk in to find her on the floor, unable to breathe, swollen, injured, and surrounded by people who are yelling instead of helping." She leaned closer to me, examining my thigh. Her voice dropped. "Rachel, that is a knife wound. Did someone stab you?" The room froze solid. A few relatives gasped. My mother whispered, "Oh, dear God!" Caleb's voice broke through the silence, defensive and too quick. "It was barely anything. The knife slipped. It was an accident." Dr. Warren rose slowly to her feet, her fury radiating in a cold, controlled wave. She looked taller than I had ever seen her, like she expanded to fill the entire room. "You stabbed an injured woman while she sat in a wheelchair." Her voice did not shake. Not once. She turned to Andrew. "Call 911. Andrew was already reaching for his phone. Caleb sputtered, his voice cracking. "No, that is not necessary. This is family business. We can talk about this." Dr. Warren's eyes burned. "No. This is assault against a disabled adult. A felony." People flinched at the word felony as if it were a physical blow. My heart pounded. My breaths came faster. My body trembled uncontrollably, partly from pain, partly from fear, partly from the sudden overwhelming relief that someone finally believed me. Someone finally saw me. A cousin attempted to protest. "Maybe we should calm down. Maybe it is not that serious." Dr. Warren spun toward her with a look that shut her up instantly. A knife wound is serious. A nerve-compromised patient on the floor is serious. The fact that none of you called for help is serious." Her voice dropped quiet but devastating. "You should all be ashamed." The silence that followed was suffocating. Andrew stepped beside her, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, this is Officer Andrew Warren. I have a disabled assault victim, significant nerve damage, puncture wound, collapsed mobility, hostile environment. We need paramedics and law enforcement at this residence immediately." As he spoke, Dr. Warren knelt beside me again, her voice gentle now. "Rachel, stay still. Help is on the way. You are safe now." Safe. The word sank into my chest like a lifeline thrown into dark water. For the first time that night, I felt my breathing slow, my body trembling less violently. Justice had stepped through the front door, and my family finally looked terrified. The room felt frozen around me, a suspended moment where no one dared to breathe too loudly. The sound of Andrew speaking to dispatch faded as Dr. Warren shifted her position and reached into her bag with practiced precision. Her movements were calm, efficient, controlled in the way only a surgeon used to high-stakes pressure could be. She pulled out her tablet, unlocked it with a quick swipe, and immediately opened a folder labeled Rachel Mobility Case. The bright screen cast a pale glow on her face, highlighting the hard lines of anger still etched across her features. The relatives who had been shouting accusations minutes ago now stood stiff and silent, eyes flicking nervously between the glowing tablet and my trembling body on the floor. Warren angled the screen so everyone could see her voice, purposeful and steady. "For those of you who seem confused about Rachel's condition, allow me to clarify the facts." She tapped the first file, and an MRI image filled the screen, swirling shades of gray and white, showing the delicate patterns of nerves and bone. "This," she said, pointing at the highlighted section of my pelvis, "is the permanent nerve damage caused by the vehicular impact last winter." Half the room leaned forward instinctively, though none of them had the medical literacy to understand what they were seeing. Still, they looked their confidence faltering. She continued without mercy. "These darkened areas represent nerve death. The sections around them are compromised. When damaged nerves attempt to send signals but misfire, the result is involuntary spasms, tremors, and burning pain." She lifted her eyes briefly, staring straight into Caleb's face. "None of which can be faked." Caleb swallowed hard but said nothing. Dr. Warren tapped to the next slide. The X-ray of my reconstructed pelvis made a few people gasp. They saw the screws, the plates, the surgical hardware holding parts of me together. This is structural reconstruction following a high-impact collision. The pelvis does not heal in a few weeks. It does not fully heal in months. It takes years, and even then, mobility remains severely limited. She scrolled to another image. A nerve conduction study appeared, displaying jagged lines across a chart. These readings demonstrate that Rachel cannot bear full weight on her left side. Attempting to stand unassisted risks collapse tendon tears and further nerve deterioration. She turned to face the room fully, her voice icy. "So, unless any of you possess medical degrees and specialized training in neuromuscular rehabilitation, I suggest you stop diagnosing her." A wave of shame rippled across the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Another muttered, "I had no idea." Warren didn't give them time to process. She tapped another file, opening a video taken during one of my physical therapy sessions. The sound of me struggling through assisted standing exercises filled the room. My arms gripped the parallel bars, my legs trembling violently, sweat dripping down my forehead. The therapist beside me spoke gently, encouragingly. "These are Rachel's documented limitations under professional supervision. She can stand for 20 to 30 seconds, sometimes 40 on a good day. She cannot walk without collapsing. She cannot pivot sharply. She cannot withstand sudden pressure on the pelvis." Let me repeat that part. She cannot withstand sudden pressure on the pelvis. Her eyes flicked toward my injured thigh, where blood had begun seeping faintly through the fabric. And yet someone applied pressure, direct pressure, with a knife. A hush settled so thick it felt like fog. Caleb took a small step back, as though distance alone might shield him from the weight of what was being said. Dr. Warren reached into her bag again and pulled out a small sterile wipe from a sealed packet, holding it near the puncture wound without touching it. "This injury is fresh, less than an hour old. The angle is downward, forceful, deliberate. She stood her hand tightening around the tablet. I would like to know who inflicted it. The pause that followed was suffocating. Finally, Caleb opened his mouth, voice cracking. It was an accident. I told you already. She leaned toward him slightly, her tone sharp enough to cut. A knife does not accidentally stab a seated person in the thigh beneath a table unless someone intentionally applied force. The relatives who had been loudly accusing me earlier now kept their eyes glued to the floor. Guilt pooled in the room like spilled ink. No one wanted to look at me. No one wanted to look at her. Caleb's voice rose desperate now. She jerked her leg. It made me slip. She caused it herself. Dr. Warren slowly shook her head. You stabbed a disabled woman and then blamed her nerves for reacting. Caleb's breath hitched. His face reddened not with shame, but with panic. Dr. Warren pressed a button on the screen, opening the last piece of evidence, a short video captured from her phone earlier in the evening. She explained calmly. When I arrived, I began recording before entering because I heard yelling. The footage began. Caleb's voice came first angry and heated, then the moment he leaned forward under the table. The camera caught the motion of his arm sharply pushing downward. A muffled cry followed. My cry. Then the scraping of my wheelchair tipping, my body hitting the floor. Gasps erupted from around the room. Someone whispered, "Oh, dear Lord!" Dr. Warren paused the video, her expression tightening. The footage is clear, the intention is clear, the harm is clear. Andrew stepped closer, hands on his hips. This is enough evidence to justify immediate arrest and felony charges. Caleb's mouth dropped open. Wait, you cannot be serious. This is family. Dr. Warren shot back. Exactly, which makes what you did even worse. She leaned down, placing the tablet gently beside me. Her voice softened for the first time. Rachel, help is almost here. The paramedics are 2 minutes away. You are safe. You will be protected. I felt my chest tighten with something overwhelming. Relief. A deep, soul-shattering relief. I had not realized I needed this desperately, because for the first time that night, for the first time in a long time, someone stood between me and the people who tried to break me. Someone brought the truth into the room. Someone defended me without hesitation, and my family finally saw the evidence of what I had been living through. They saw the truth, and the truth terrified them. The moment the video stopped playing, the room seemed to fold inward on itself. No one spoke, no one moved, and no one even breathed too loudly. It felt as if the oxygen had been sucked straight out of the house, leaving behind only a thick, suffocating silence that settled over everyone like dust. I lay there on the hardwood floor, the pain in my thigh throbbing in sharp pulses that matched the pounding of my heart, but for once, the physical agony was not the center of the room. The truth was, the raw, undeniable truth that had just been displayed in full color and perfect audio for every single person who had doubted me, mocked me, whispered behind their hands, or openly accused me of faking for sympathy. Dr. Warren lowered the tablet slowly, letting the silence sit long enough for the shame to truly take root. Then she spoke in a voice that carried the weight of someone used to commanding an operating room. I will ask this once. When she fell, who stepped in to help her? The question cut through the room like a blade. No one answered. Not a single person. Eyes darted away, staring at the floorboards, the ceiling fan, the turkey on the dining table, anywhere but at me or her. Someone shifted uncomfortably, the rustle of clothing almost obscenely loud in the quiet. My Aunt Denise had been the loudest earlier, her voice rising above the others as she accused me of ruining holidays with my so-called dramatics. Now, she wiped at her eyes, mascara smearing into black streaks as she stared down at her plate. I did not know, she whispered, though she did not dare lift her gaze. You knew enough to judge, Dr. Warren replied coldly. You did not know enough to care. My cousin Evan, the one who had suggested calling Social Security to report me for fraud, swallowed hard and stuffed his phone quickly into his pocket, as though hiding it might erase everything he had said. His mother reached over and snatched the phone from him. Give it! He obeyed without protest. His face had drained of color, and he looked more like a scolded child than a grown adult. Across the room, the live-streaming relatives stood frozen, phone still raised until Dr. Warren fixed her eyes on him. "Turn that off immediately!" His thumb fumbled across the screen as he ended the broadcast. Then reluctantly, he held the phone out. Dr. Warren's husband stepped forward and said, "Sir, I am requesting that device be given to law enforcement for evidence." The man hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing with a hard swallow. Then he placed the phone into the officer's palm, shoulders trembling faintly. Caleb backed toward the wall like a cornered animal, sweat beading across his forehead. His eyes were darting around the room, searching for someone, anyone to step in for him, but no one did. No one defended him, not even the people who had been so eager to defend him minutes earlier. Mom finally stepped forward, but not toward me, not toward Caleb. She stood in the center of the room, wringing her hands so hard her knuckles whitened. The trembling in her fingers traveled up her arms, up her shoulders, until even her voice shook. "I did not see it clearly. I did not know he was going to." She trailed off, unable to finish. Dr. Warren looked at her not with softness, but with a clinical honesty that cut deeper than any insult. "You knew she fell. You knew she cried out, and yet you stood still." The words landed like a hammer. Mom's mouth opened then closed again. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear the guilt from her eyes. "I was overwhelmed," she whispered. I thought she was exaggerating again. The pain in my chest tightened. Again. That word echoed inside me like a slap. That was how she had seen me all this time. Not struggling, not suffering, exaggerating. Caleb swallowed hard and finally spoke. "It was an accident. I was defending her. I was trying to." Dr. Warren cut in sharply. "Protect her. By stabbing her, by knocking her to the floor, by humiliating her in front of her entire family." His jaw clenched and tears of frustration filled his eyes. He looked around the room for backup. No one spoke. Not even the ones who had been calling me manipulative and draining minutes earlier. Uncle Gary shifted awkwardly and cleared his throat. "Maybe we should not have jumped to conclusions." "Maybe." Dr. Warren repeated the word slowly, her tone icy. "You were all eager to jump to the worst conclusion about her, and the best possible one about him." Her gaze moved deliberately from one relative to the next. "Shame is often the first sign of conscience, but it means nothing without action." My cousin Marla, the one who had filmed me from the corner earlier, covered her mouth with a shaking hand. "I cannot believe this happened," she whispered. Dr. Warren turned to the live streamer again. "Did you record the moment she was stabbed and knocked off her wheelchair?" He nodded weakly. "Then please step outside and wait for the officers. They will need your statement and your video evidence." He left immediately, shoulders hunched. Caleb opened his mouth again, but only managed a strangled sound that resembled a plea. No one came to his defense, not a single person. Even those who liked him most looked away. The shame had spread like wildfire. Dr. Warren crouched beside me once more, her tone softened only for me. "Rachel, can you move your hands?" I nodded shakily. She continued checking my leg, her hands steady and practiced. "The paramedics are in the driveway," she said quietly. "We will get you help now." Then she stood again and lifted her chin toward the room. "For the record, Rachel's injury is serious. The puncture wound could have hit a nerve or tendon. The fall placed severe stress on her reconstruction sites, and not one of you responded while she lay on the ground." Her eyes swept over them one last time. "I hope every one of you remembers this moment." The front door opened and paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. As they knelt beside me, the relatives parted like a guilty sea. Their silence was deafening. Their shame was heavy. And for the first time in my life, I saw what accountability looked like on their faces. And it was fear. The paramedics moved with swift precision, their calm urgency slicing through the tension that still clung to the living room like thick smoke. One knelt beside me and asked my name, his voice low and steady while the other assessed the angle of my injured leg, already noting the swelling and the way my thigh twitched involuntarily from the nerve flare. I answered as best as I could, my voice trembling, my breath shallow. The room around me had become a blur of ashamed faces and a handful of wide, fearful eyes. Mom stood near the dining table, hands clasped tightly at her chest as though praying silently, but she still did not step forward. That detail cut deeper than the pain radiating down my leg. The paramedics secured me carefully onto the stretcher, each touch measured, each adjustment precise. When they lifted me, I felt the full burn of the stab wound, sharp and hot, traveling down into my knee and up toward my hip like fire tracking along a fuse. I bit down on a cry, and the medic closest to me murmured, "Breathe slow. You are safe now." Safe. The word struck something inside me. I was leaving the place where I should have been safe and going to one where strangers had proven far kinder than my own blood. The stretcher rolled through the living room past the turkey, the mashed potatoes, the untouched rolls, past the family who had watched me fall and done nothing. Caleb stood against the far wall, shock hollowing out his face. He lifted a hand halfway toward me, maybe to gesture, maybe to apologize, but Andrew stepped directly into his path, his voice cold when he said, "Do not go near her." Caleb's face crumpled, but I could not bring myself to look at him any longer. As the paramedics guided the stretcher toward the front door, a wave of whispers followed behind us. Someone said, "My God, what have we done?" Another muttered, "This is going to be all over town." And someone else quietly added, "It should be." The cold night air hit my face as we exited the house, crisp and biting, waking me up from the fog that had settled around me. The flashing lights illuminated the driveway, painting everything red and blue. The neighbors had stepped outside, staring at the chaos, hands clasped to their chests, or whispering behind their fingers. Dr. Warren walked beside the stretcher until we reached the ambulance. She placed a reassuring hand on mine before I was lifted inside. "You will be all right," she said with quiet conviction. "I am following behind you." Andrew joined the paramedics up front after giving one last stern warning to my family at the door, though his words were lost in the closing doors of the ambulance. Inside, one of the paramedics attached a blood pressure cuff while the other prepared an IV line. The interior lights flickered on sterile and bright, casting sharp reflections off the equipment. The motion of the ambulance pulling out of the driveway sent another jolt of pain through my leg. I sucked in air, gripping the side rails, shaking from a mix of adrenaline, fear, and agony. The medic gave me a soft nod. "I know it hurts. We are going to take care of you." As we sped toward the hospital, the flashing lights reflecting through the windows like streaks of lightning, the medic began asking me routine questions. Rate your pain from 1 to 10. How long since the injury? Any loss of feeling? But his calm tone could not drown out the haunting echoes of the accusation Caleb had screamed over our family dinner. "Stop pretending. Pretending would have been easier. Pretending would have hurt less." By the time we reached the emergency room entrance, my body trembled uncontrollably. The sliding doors opened with a mechanical hum bathing the inside of the ambulance in fluorescent light. Nurses rushed forward to help transfer me. The air smelled of antiseptic and cold metal. They wheeled me directly into a trauma evaluation bay, drawing a curtain behind them. Dr. Warren arrived moments later, still in her coat hair, slightly windswept from rushing in behind the ambulance. She came straight to my side. "I am here," she said quietly. "I will stay." The ER team worked quickly. They cut away the fabric around my thigh to examine the wound. I heard the words puncture, swelling, deep tissue, possible nerve involvement. They cleaned the wound, the sting sharp and biting, and wrapped it tightly before sending me for immediate imaging. The CT scan room felt like a cavern, cold and humming. My leg burned as they shifted me onto the table. The machine whirred above my head, the mechanical voice instructing me to hold still, even though every nerve in my body seemed to twitch with pain. After the imaging, they wheeled me back to the bay where Dr. Warren stood waiting, her expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. She held the preliminary scans in her hand. "You have a tendon strain," she said softly, "and swelling along the reconstruction site. The puncture is shallow but dangerously placed. We are admitting you overnight for observation and pain management." Her voice tightened. This could have been much worse. My vision blurred slightly as a wave of exhaustion hit. I nodded weakly, unable to speak. A few minutes later, a detective walked in. He wore a dark jacket, a badge clipped near his belt, and carried a small notepad. His expression softened when he saw me. "Ms. Hartley, I am Detective Simmons. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened tonight." Dr. Warren stepped closer to me, her presence grounding. "Rachel can answer," she said, "but she is in pain." "Go slow." The detective pulled up a chair and sat at eye level with me. "I know this is difficult," he said, "but I need you to tell me exactly what happened before the paramedics arrived." My throat tightened, my hands shook, but I nodded and began to speak. I told him about the dinner, about the prayer, about the sudden sharp pressure under the table, about Caleb's voice, accusing me about the fall. My voice cracked when I reached the part where no one helped me. The detective listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally glancing at Dr. Warren for medical clarification. When I finished, he closed his notepad with a soft, deliberate click. "Rachel," he said, "based on your statement and the video evidence provided by Dr. Warren, this qualifies as aggravated battery against a disabled adult. We will be issuing a warrant for Caleb Hartley's arrest immediately." My breath caught. Even though I knew it was coming, hearing it out loud made the room spin slightly. The detective added, "You did the right thing by telling the truth. You are safe now." Safe! The word came again, settling differently this time. Not fragile, not desperate. Solid, real. A nurse approached with paperwork for adjustments and an update about my room assignment. As they prepared to move me upstairs, Dr. Warren placed a hand on my shoulder. "You are not alone," she said. "You have people who will stand with you." And her being there proved it. The stretcher rolled out of the trauma bay, the curtain swaying behind us. For the first time in hours, I let my eyes close, letting the hum of the hospital and the steady rhythm of the IV pump drown out the memory of the dining room floor. For the first time all night, I felt like I might actually survive this. By the time morning light filtered weakly through the blinds of my hospital room, I had barely slept. Every time I drifted off, flashes of the previous night jolted me awake. The pressure of the knife against my thigh, the wheeze of my wheelchair hitting the floor, the sound of relatives whispering, "She is doing it again," like my pain was nothing more than a party trick. The antiseptic smell of the room did little to calm me, but at least it was clean and quiet. At least no one here doubted I belonged where I was. A soft knock sounded at the door. Dr. Warren stepped in first, her eyes scanning the monitors beside me before she gave a small, approving nod. "You had a rough night," she said gently, pulling a chair closer to my bed. "How is your pain level now?" "Manageable," I said, though the throbbing in my thigh told another story. She raised an eyebrow but did not challenge me on it. Before she could say anything else, a uniformed officer appeared in the doorway. He approached with a calm, respectful demeanor, giving me the sense he'd worked cases like this before. Cases involving vulnerable people, harmed by someone who should have protected them. "Ms. Hartley," he said, offering a small nod. "I am Officer Duran with the local police department. I have an update regarding the investigation into last night's incident." My stomach tightened, but I nodded for him to continue. "We executed the arrest warrant early this morning. Your brother Caleb Hartley was taken into custody at your mother's residence around 6:30 a.m. The words landed harder than I expected. Even after everything he had done, hearing them out loud triggered a swirl of emotions, confusion, sorrow, vindication, grief, all bleeding together in dizzying waves. "Was he cooperative?" I asked quietly. Officer Duran hesitated. "Cooperative enough." He attempted to claim the stabbing was accidental, but the footage recorded by Dr. Warren and the witness videos left little room for interpretation. I closed my eyes for a moment, the image of Caleb's face flashing behind my lids, the twist of anger, the bitterness, the absolute conviction that I was lying. A conviction he had chosen over believing the sister he grew up with. Officer Duran continued, "The charge filed is aggravated battery against a disabled adult. It is a felony offense in this state. There will also be an additional charge for reckless endangerment related to the fall from your wheelchair." My breath hitched softly. Even though I had wanted justice, the reality of it still felt heavy. Felony. My brother. My blood. Beside me, Dr. Warren rested a steadying hand on the bed rail, her presence grounding. Officer Duran cleared his throat. "There is something else. Your mother attempted to intervene during the arrest. Her statements indicated she may not fully understand the severity of his actions. We have referred her to a social worker for evaluation given the circumstances involving both of your disabilities and her role as a caregiver." My pulse quickened. Evaluation, which meant the police believed there was neglect involved. Dr. Warren spoke before I could. "That is appropriate," she said firmly. The family's behavior last night demonstrated a pattern of minimizing her medical condition. This is not a one-time lapse. Officer Duran nodded professionally. We agree. For now, the district attorney will be reviewing everything this afternoon. They typically pursue these cases aggressively when the victim is medically vulnerable. He softened his tone slightly. Which you are. I felt something tighten in my throat. Being labeled vulnerable was not new, but having the law acknowledge it felt different. He handed me a small card. If you remember anything else, or if anyone contacts you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, call me directly. We will assign a protective order if needed. After he left, the silence in the room thickened. I stared at the card, my fingers brushing its edge. The idea that I might need protection from my own family made my stomach turn. Dr. Warren exhaled softly and adjusted the blanket over my legs. How are you holding up? I do not know. I admitted, it feels like everything is happening too fast and too slow at the same time. That is shock, she said simply. You were traumatized physically and emotionally. The fallout is always disorienting. She fell quiet for a moment, then added, Rachel, you did the right thing. I looked at her sharply. Did I? My brother is in jail. My family probably hates me. My mother will blame me for every consequence that comes next. Dr. Warren's gaze softened. Caleb stabbed you. He caused a fall that could have jeopardized your reconstruction surgery. Your relatives enabled it. You are not responsible for their actions. They are responsible for their own. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed weakly on the bedside table. I reached for it with unsteady fingers. 22 missed messages. Group texts buzzing with activity. A pit formed in my stomach before I even read the words. The family chat was exploding. Mom, they took Caleb away in handcuffs. Why did you do this, Aunt Denise? This is tearing us apart. Could you not have handled it privately? Cousin Evan, you should at least tell them it was an accident. It is the right thing to do. The right thing, even after seeing the video, even after doing nothing while I lay on the floor, even after hearing the police call it felony battery. They still thought I should protect him. Dr. Warren saw the look on my face and gently took the phone from my hand. Rachel, she said firmly, you do not need to engage with any of that. Not now, not ever if it harms you. My eyes burned hot with the threat of tears. He is my brother, I whispered helplessly. She squeezed my hand. And you are his victim. The words pierced straight through me because they were true with a clear clinical truth that was impossible to avoid. The door opened again this time, revealing a hospital social worker carrying a clipboard and a gentle expression. There are some forms we need to go over, she said softly, and I would like to talk to you about support resources. As she moved closer, Dr. Warren stepped aside, but remained in the room, a protective presence. My life had split in two, before Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving. And now, in the sterile quiet of an emergency room built to save people in their worst moments, I began to understand that this time, I was the one being saved. 6 months after Thanksgiving, the season had changed twice, but the aftermath of that night still clung to my life like smoke that refused to lift. Winter melted into spring. Spring drifted into the thick humidity of early summer. Yet every time I drove past my mother's street or smelled roasted turkey from a restaurant vent, the memory of the knife pressing into my thigh slammed back into me with brutal clarity. The fallout began slowly like cracks appearing in a frozen lake, and then everything broke at once. Caleb lost his job within 2 weeks of his arrest. The warehouse where he worked had a strict policy regarding violence, especially violence against vulnerable adults. An HR director called me privately to confirm a few details, her voice uncomfortable but firm. We cannot keep him on staff, she said. Not with a felony charge pending, not with the footage circulating. Footage, that was another avalanche. The video from Dr. Warren was not public, but the live-streamed clip from a distant cousin had been saved by someone before it was deleted. Within days, it began spreading in community Facebook groups. The quality was grainy, but the moment was unmistakable. The camera caught my involuntary jerk, the movement of Caleb's arm stabbing downward, the sound of my body hitting the floor, and the chaotic scramble of voices afterward. People argued fiercely in the comments, but most saw exactly what happened. A disabled woman stabbed during Thanksgiving dinner by her own brother. Even in a world desensitized to outrage, it hit a nerve. My mother was recognized in grocery stores. People approached her and asked if it was true. Some asked why she did nothing. She started shopping late at night to avoid the stares. One afternoon in January, she sent me a message that simply said, "Everyone thinks I am a monster. You have ruined us." I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the familiar ache of guilt and betrayal twist together. I did not reply. Not because I did not care, but because I finally understood that I could not carry her shame for her. The district attorney officially filed charges in February. Caleb pleaded not guilty at first, his arrogance still clinging tightly, but by March, the evidence had become overwhelming. Dr. Warren's medical documentation, the witness statements, the live stream video, my own medical records showing the additional damage caused by the fall. His lawyer eventually advised him to change his plea. The morning he stood before the judge and muttered guilty in a quiet, hoarse voice, I was not in the courtroom. Dr. Warren had offered to come with me. Therapists encouraged me to attend for closure, but the truth was more complicated. I did not want to see him shrink behind a podium wearing county-issued clothing. I did not want that image fighting with the memories of us as children. I wanted the law to handle him far away from my eyes. His sentencing hearing was held in April. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and a reputation for being strict, sentenced him to 2 years probation, mandatory anger management, and 120 hours of community service at a rehabilitation center that specialized in nerve injury patients. It was poetic in a way that would have made me laugh if it did not hurt so much. My mother called the day after his sentencing, her voice brittle. "I hope you are happy. Your brother has to scrub bedpans now." I nearly dropped the phone. Scrubbing bedpans was many things, but punishment for stabbing me was not the outrageous injustice she implied. I told her calmly, "Mom, he could have paralyzed me. He could have killed me." She hung up without another word. Meanwhile, my own life had shifted into a strange rhythm of pain management, physical therapy, and cautious attempts at independence. The stab wound had healed, but the swelling along my reconstruction site took months to reduce. The fall had strained ligaments and stirred up nerve flare that made walking practice excruciating. Some days I progressed 2 steps forward, other days 5 steps back. There were mornings when my leg spasmed so violently I could not even transfer from my bed to my wheelchair without calling someone for help. Nights were worst. PTSD settled over me quietly but relentlessly. The sound of silverware clinking against plates, the scrape of a chair leg, a sudden movement under a table. Any of those could send a bolt of cold fear through me so strong I trembled. My therapist explained that trauma rewired the body before it rewired the mind. It made sense, but knowing the reason did not stop my hands from shaking every time a family gathering commercial aired on TV. I stayed away from my mother's house completely. She sent a few messages over the months, mostly guilt-laced attempts to get me to intervene in Caleb's case. I ignored them. My social worker encouraged me to set boundaries. My medical team supported me wholeheartedly. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who believed in my pain instead of minimizing it. In May, I attempted walking with a walker again. I managed 3 steps before collapsing into tears from the burning pain screaming down my leg. My physical therapist crouched beside me and said, "The fact that you tried is progress. You will have good days again." I believed her because she had never lied to me, unlike the people who claimed to love me. Summer crept in slowly, warm and bright, and though the season promised renewal, my world still felt fragile. But something subtle began to shift during that 6th month. Strangers online sent messages of support. Disability advocates reached out asking me to share my story. I received a handwritten letter from someone in a neighboring town who said she had been dismissed by her own family for chronic pain. She ended the letter with, "You helped me see that I am not alone." Those words hit me harder than any insult from my family. They reminded me that healing was not always loud or triumphant. Sometimes it was the quiet understanding that someone out there finally saw you. Caleb, meanwhile, was at the rehabilitation center serving his hours. I heard from the social worker that his understanding of nerve pain changed drastically in those weeks. I did not know whether that made me feel vindicated or exhausted. Maybe both. 6 months after the stabbing, as I lay in my hospital bed finishing another round of nerve injections, something inside me finally settled. Not forgiveness, not closure, but a steady, unwavering truth. I had survived my family, and I was never going back to the version of myself who felt small around them. The civil lawsuit began not with drama or screaming, but with a single envelope slid under my apartment door one humid afternoon in July. The air outside was thick with heat, the kind that made my reconstructed hip ache in a deep, pulsing way, and I had been icing my leg when I heard the soft whisper of paper against carpet. I opened the door to an empty hallway, only the hum of an overhead light flickering slightly, then bent to pick up the envelope. Inside was a letter from attorney Marissa Blake, a disability rights lawyer recommended by my social worker and known in Ohio for handling cases involving medical neglect, workplace injury, and familial abuse toward disabled adults. The message was short but powerful. Rachel, your case deserves justice beyond the criminal charges. If you are ready, we can proceed. Reading those words sent a long shiver through me, the kind that rose from my stomach and climbed into my throat. A part of me wanted to hide from the whole thing, to pretend the fallout had already played out and that reopening the wounds would somehow break me again. But another part, the part that survived, surgeries survived, accusations survived, that Thanksgiving dinner whispered you owe yourself the truth. A week later, I met Marissa in her office downtown. The walls were lined with framed newspaper clippings and degrees evidence of a career built on fighting for people whose voices had been ignored. She greeted me warmly, pulling out a chair and making sure I was comfortable before sitting across from me. You have been through hell, she began, and I want to start by saying I believe you. Completely. Those words alone nearly undid me. No suspicion, no hesitation, no second guessing. Marissa opened a thick folder. We will be pursuing civil action for 3 primary reasons. First, the stabbing and fall caused additional medical damage. Second, your family created a hostile environment that exacerbated your disability. And third, their accusations of fraud directly impacted your mental health, mobility recovery, and financial stability. She paused and folded her hands. We are suing Caleb, but I also believe we should pursue claims against specific relatives who aided or enabled the harassment. The idea stunned me. I blinked at her. Suing my family? Again. Not the whole family, she clarified. Only those whose actions played a measurable role in your harm. The live streamer, the relatives who verbally incited the situation, those who intentionally spread misinformation about your disability. I swallowed hard. My heart felt too large for my chest. My mother was not included, she asked gently. I shook my head firmly. No, she was complicit, but I just cannot. Marissa nodded respectfully. This is your case. Your limits matter. Over the next hour, she explained the process in clear, structured language. The gathering of medical documentation, the estimation of damages, the witness affidavits, the evidence review. She explained the categories of damages we would pursue. Economic damages for medical bills, future treatments, mobility equipment replacements, and therapy costs. Non-economic damages for emotional distress, humiliation, and psychological trauma. And punitive damages intended to punish Caleb and the others for malicious or reckless behavior. I listened carefully, my leg throbbing, my fingers twisting the edge of my jacket. The thought of seeing my family in depositions made my stomach turn. They will retaliate, I said quietly, thinking of the messages from months before. They will blame me for everything. Marissa gave a small, confident smile. Let them. Their fear of consequences is not your burden to carry. The truth is clear. The evidence is clear, and you deserve to live without their denial weighing on your recovery. Before leaving the office, I signed the authorization forms. My hand shook slightly as I wrote my name, but the final stroke of ink felt like a boundary drawn across my life. When the lawsuit was served, exactly what Marissa predicted happened. The group chat exploded. Accusations flew like sparks. Aunt Denise called the lawsuit ridiculous. Cousin Evan claimed I was exploiting the situation for money. The live streaming relative claimed his video was taken out of context, ignoring the fact that it had already been reviewed by law enforcement. Mom sent one long message full of fractured sentences blaming me for tearing the family apart, pleading with me to reconsider, insisting that Caleb had already suffered enough. But something in me had changed after 6 months of building my strength alone. I read the messages but did not respond. Instead, I forwarded every threatening or manipulative text directly to Marissa. She documented each one, labeling them as intimidation attempts or retaliation attempts. Meanwhile, Caleb mostly stayed silent. His probation officer made clear that any attempt to contact me would violate his terms. But silence has a sound, and his was heavy. I imagined him reading the lawsuit packet, hands shaking, realizing that accountability was not going to fade with time. Depositions began in August. The first was Caleb's. I did not attend in person, but Marissa called me afterward. He admitted to pushing his arm under the table, she said. Claimed he intended only to startle you, not injure you, but the pressure he applied was reckless. When asked why he accused you of pretending, he said he was frustrated and tired of seeing you get attention. My throat tightened. Frustrated. Tired. As if my disability was a performance designed to upset him. Marissa continued. He also said he did not expect the fall to be so severe. I laughed bitterly. They never expect their cruelty to echo. The live streamer's deposition was next. His voice shook on the transcript, Marissa noted, and he admitted that he filmed because he thought the drama would escalate. When asked if he believed my disability was genuine, he paused for almost 30 seconds before answering yes. That hesitation said everything. The relatives who had verbally attacked me gave similar half-apologies mashed with excuses. I was overwhelmed. I thought she was exaggerating. I did not realize it would get so bad. In each deposition, Marissa pushed gently but unrelentingly, her questions polished and precise. She knew exactly where the cracks were, and she pressed until the truth seeped through. The more testimony we gathered, the more my story solidified, not as an opinion, but as a documented pattern of abuse, negligence, and humiliation. Marissa called me one evening as I was making tea, the steam fogging up my glasses. "We have enough," she said. "Enough to move forward. Enough to win." I leaned against the counter, the weight of her words settling into me with a surprising warmth. 6 months ago, I had been lying on a hardwood floor, bleeding, shaking, surrounded by people who doubted my pain. Now, with every deposition, every document, every witness statement, the narrative was shifting. My truth was no longer something I had to convince people of. It was something undeniable, something recorded, something protected. The lawsuit had begun as a way to seek justice, but somewhere along the way, it had become something else. Something that returned a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. My voice. The story hit the local news on a quiet Wednesday morning in early September, the kind of morning where the sky was a washed-out pale blue and the air carried the lingering coolness of dawn. I was making coffee, moving slowly to allow my hip time to warm up, when my phone began vibrating non-stop on the kitchen table. Dozens of notifications, missed calls, messages from numbers I did not recognize. For a moment, my hands hovered uncertainly above the screen, my pulse quickening with the familiar tug of anxiety. When I finally opened one of the links someone sent, my breath caught in my throat. The headline read, "Disabled woman stabbed by brother during Thanksgiving dinner. Video evidence confirms assault." Beneath it was a still frame from the live stream my cousin had recorded Caleb standing arm thrust downward, the tension in his posture unmistakable. The angle did not show my face thanks to Dr. Warren's insistence on protecting my privacy, but the context was undeniable. The news anchor's voice filled my quiet kitchen as the clip autoplayed. A developing story out of Ohio has sparked outrage after video surfaced of a disabled woman being stabbed in the leg by her brother during a family gathering. The screen cut to a blurred video that still made my stomach drop. The muffled sound of my cry, the clatter of my wheelchair tipping the harsh words Caleb shouted afterward. My chest tightened as the reporter continued. Police confirmed that the woman whose name is being withheld due to medical privacy suffered additional injuries from the fall. The brother faces felony charges. The anchor then added a line that made me grip the edge of the table. Experts say this case highlights the growing problem of families dismissing or gaslighting disabled relatives. The phrase gaslighting disabled relatives echoed in my kitchen like a bell struck too hard. The comments began pouring in immediately beneath the posted video. That poor woman! How could her brother do that? I hope she heals and finds peace. This is horrifying. Families can be cruel. And then I know someone who went through something similar. Standing there in my small apartment, wrapped in a sweater and leaning heavily on the counter for support, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. Not vindication exactly, not triumph, but something softer, something like being seen. For months, I had been swimming in disbelief from the people who were supposed to know me best. Now, strangers were acknowledging the truth without hesitation. But with visibility came something heavier, too. A wave of attention I did not feel prepared for. By noon, the story had spread beyond local news to regional networks and disability advocacy blogs. People shared their own experiences in the comment stories of being accused of faking pain, being told to toughen up, being ignored when they cried for help. I found myself scrolling through the comments long after I should have rested each post a reminder that what happened to me was part of a much larger pattern. Around 2 o'clock, my mother called. I hesitated before answering. When I finally pressed accept, her voice came through in a frantic rush. "Rachel, what have you done? This is everywhere. The whole town is talking about it." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. I did not release anything, Mom. "Your nephew live-streamed it." She ignored that. "People keep asking me how I allowed this to happen. They are looking at me like I am some kind of monster." For a long moment, I let the silence sit, then answered quietly, "Maybe it is time you think about why they're asking that." Her breath hitched sharply, like the thought had never occurred to her. She mumbled something I could not understand and hung up. The calls did not stop there. A few relatives reached out in panicked tones, wanting to make statements, wanting me to help control the damage, wanting to know if there was any way to make the lawsuit disappear. My cousin Evan sent a message that read, "Can you tell the news it wasn't as bad as it looks?" My hands shook with disbelief. I forwarded the message to Marissa, who replied in minutes, "Documented." As the day went on, advocacy groups began sharing posts demanding better protections for disabled adults. A disability rights organization reached out asking if I would be willing to tell my story at an awareness panel. I stared at the email for a long time before closing my laptop. I could barely walk reliably. The thought of speaking publicly felt impossible. And yet something about the invitation stirred an ember inside me, a sense that maybe my suffering could mean something more than pain. That evening, a second news segment aired, this time interviewing a licensed psychologist who spoke about familial abuse dynamics and the tendency for families to minimize or deny invisible disabilities. Hearing a professional say out loud, everything I had lived through made my skin prickle. It was surreal. Dr. Warren texted me shortly afterward. "You handled today with grace. Please rest." I wanted to respond. I wanted to thank her for believing in me long before anyone else did. Instead, I stared at her message until tears blurred the screen. But the public exposure did not just affect me. Caleb became a pariah. His name circulated on social media attached to words like monster and abuser. His mugshot spread, his probation details leaked, and someone even posted a screenshot of the rehab center where he was serving community service. I did not celebrate any of it, but I also did not feel guilty. Actions have consequences. Marissa reminded me during one of our follow-up calls. Accountability is not cruelty. My mother refused to leave the house for days. Relatives whispered behind closed doors, terrified their names might surface in one of the articles. By Friday, the local church issued a statement condemning violence against disabled individuals, thinly veiled but clearly referring to Caleb's case. My mother sent me a long text that said, "The pastor asked me if I knew what was happening. You have embarrassed us." My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed only 4 words. I did nothing wrong. I placed the phone face down after that, unwilling to absorb any more venom. Late that night, after the last news segment had aired and the notifications had slowed, I sat in the dim light of my living room and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The world felt impossibly big. The story had escaped the walls of my family home and turned into something larger than all of us. And for once, I was not hiding in the shadows of my pain. People believed me not because I cried loud enough, but because they finally saw the truth for themselves. I whispered into the quiet, barely audible even to myself I survived. And I think maybe for the first time in years, I meant it. Caleb's downfall did not happen all at once. It happened in layers, each one stripping away a part of the life he had so confidently built on the assumption that consequences were things that happened to other people. In the weeks after the story hit the news, his world began shrinking faster than he could react. First came the job loss, which he had already faced months earlier, but now employers in town refused even to consider him. Word traveled quickly in small communities, and even places known for giving second chances steered clear of someone with a violent felony charge tied to a disabled victim. His former supervisor, who had once vouched for Caleb's work ethic, was quoted anonymously in a news article saying, "We cannot risk hiring someone capable of harming a vulnerable person. Liability is too high." It was harsh, but it was true. Car insurance rates skyrocketed. His landlord did not renew his lease. Bills piled up faster than he could open them. He tried picking up odd jobs around town, but each time someone recognized him, the work ended abruptly. No one wanted a man like that in their home. Not with the video still circulating. By early October, he was living out of the back seat of his rusted truck, the same truck he used to mock me for not being able to climb into anymore. Now it was his shelter. His bathroom was the gas station down the street. His meals came from discount convenience store shelves. He tried staying with friends, but they all had excuses. Not enough space. Too much going on. Some even told him outright they could not risk being associated with him. And when he reached out to our mother, the one person he believed would always take him back, the conversation ended in tears and slammed doors. She let him stay for one night, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of love. But when neighbors began whispering and church members stopped inviting her to gatherings, she turned on him too. "You cannot stay," she said, voice trembling. "People are watching us. They think I raised a monster." Caleb, who had always relied on her protection, stared at her like the ground had vanished under his feet. "Mom, I need help," he said. "This is your mess," she whispered. "You fix it." He slept in his truck again that night, rain tapping on the roof, like a cruel reminder that even the sky had more shelter than he did. Meanwhile, the community service hours assigned by the court became the center of his existence. The rehabilitation center looked nothing like the warehouse he once worked in. It was quiet, methodical, filled with people who moved slowly, talked softly, and carried pain in ways he had never bothered to understand. His first day there, he watched a young man struggle to stand between two parallel bars, trembling from nerve damage almost identical to mine. Caleb's initial instinct was to look away, uncomfortable with the rawness of suffering he had never acknowledged. But the physical therapist supervising him was unyielding. "Help him," she ordered. Caleb protested that he did not know what to do, but she pointed to the gloves and support belt. "Learn," she said. The young man looked at Caleb with tired, honest eyes and whispered, "Do not let me fall." Something in Caleb's face shifted slightly. He took the belt, secured it gently around the man's waist, braced his own stance, and guided him forward. They moved inches, not feet. But every inch was a battle the man fought with everything he had. When the session ended, the man collapsed back into his wheelchair with relief, murmuring, "Thank you, man." Caleb could not speak for several seconds. That was the first time he saw the pain he once dismissed as pretend. Over the next few weeks, he worked with dozens of patients. Some could stand for only moments. Some shook violently with tremors. Some cried from frustration. Some apologized for needing help. And every time Caleb steadied a shoulder or lifted someone who had fallen, he saw me. Me on the floor. Me gasping from pain. Me begging my own family to believe me. His bravado eroded in those bright white hallways where the scent of disinfectant mixed with humility. The nurses saw the change too. One of them later recounted to Marissa during deposition prep that Caleb started showing up early, asking questions about how nerve damage felt, reading pamphlets. even staying late to clean equipment without being asked. He listened to the patient's stories. He apologized when he made mistakes. He stopped pretending he understood more than he did. One afternoon during a session, a patient asked him what brought him there. Caleb hesitated before admitting, "I hurt someone I should have protected," and when the patient replied gently, "Then do better now," something in Caleb finally cracked all the way through. Meanwhile, I watched these updates come in from a careful emotional distance. I did not forgive him, not yet, but I tracked his progress the way one watches a storm slowly lose force. I read every report Marissa forwarded about his compliance with probation. I saw the notes about his behavior, the supervisor's comments that he was respectful and cooperative, even remorseful. But remorse did not erase what he did. It did not erase the pain or the fear or the humiliation. It did not erase the way he had shouted, "Stop pretending," while I lay on the floor bleeding. It did not erase the months of silence when he could have reached out, but did not. Still, part of me listened. Part of me wanted to know whether he was becoming someone capable of change. The final fracture in his old life came in November, almost exactly 1 year after the stabbing. His girlfriend of 3 years visited the rehab center to talk to him. She had stood by him during the initial shock, defending him to mutual friends, insisting he was misunderstood. But now she saw the truth too clearly. She sat beside him in the center's courtyard and said simply, "I cannot build a life with someone who is capable of hurting his own sister like that." His face crumpled, but he did not argue. He nodded, eyes red, as she walked away. That night, he sat alone in his truck, writing a letter he would later bring to me. He wrote every admission, every regret, every truth he had refused to speak. And with each word, he felt the weight of the man he once was fall away like dust shaken from an old coat. By the end of the month, Caleb had become a ghost in our town, the man who stabbed his disabled sister, the man who lost everything, the man forced to confront the ugliness inside himself. But something else formed too. A man trying desperately, painstakingly to be someone better. Someone real. Someone I might one day be able to face without collapsing into pain. He had fallen completely, and now he was learning what it meant to stand back up without stepping on someone else to do it. Caleb's mandatory community service hours at the rehabilitation center gradually shifted from punishment to something closer to reckoning, though he would never have admitted that out loud when the assignment first began. At the start, he moved stiffly through the halls, eyes down, cheeks flushed with humiliation every time a nurse pointed out a mistake or reminded him to speak gently to patients. He hated the feeling of being watched, corrected, judged. But slowly, something started breaking open inside him. It began one morning with an elderly man named Thomas, a former machinist with weathered hands and a soft voice. Thomas had suffered severe nerve damage after a fall and struggled to lift his legs even an inch. Caleb was assigned to help him through his routine. For 30 minutes, Thomas tried to raise his left foot and could not, but he kept trying. At the end of the session, Thomas smiled at Caleb and whispered, "I appreciate you not rushing me." "Most people rush me." Caleb swallowed hard, not sure how to respond. That afternoon, he watched another patient, a teenage girl with partial paralysis, sob in frustration because she could not move her foot, even though she said she felt like she should be able to. The therapist explained gently that sometimes nerves send signals that never reach the muscles. Sometimes the body lies to you. Caleb felt something jolt in his chest when he heard that. His breath hitched in a way he could not control. He kept seeing me on Thanksgiving night hitting the floor, the way my leg jerked involuntarily, the stabbing heat shooting through my thigh. He remembered the disbelief on my face when he accused me of faking and the way he rolled his eyes instead of offering help. That memory began following him through every hallway, through every shift. It wrapped around him whenever he helped lift someone into a wheelchair, whenever he steadied someone shaking from nerve spasms, whenever he saw a patient close their eyes in frustration or pain. One day, after helping the patient through tremors so severe that the man collapsed in exhaustion, Caleb stepped into the supply room, leaned against the shelves, and cried. He pressed his fists to his eyes, ashamed of the tears, but unable to stop them. A supervising therapist found him like that. She did not scold him. Instead, she said quietly, "Sometimes you cannot understand what someone lives with until you step into their world." Caleb nodded, biting his lip hard enough to taste iron. After that breakdown, something changed. He began arriving early and asking questions about nerve damage, chronic pain, mobility training. He stayed late cleaning equipment even when no one watched. He stopped bristling when corrected and instead paid close attention. Patients noticed. Nurses noticed. His supervisor wrote in her weekly report, "Caleb is developing empathy and insight. He is applying himself. There is genuine change." Around this time, he began writing me a letter. It started with a few hesitant sentences scribbled on a scrap of paper folded inside his pocket. But each night after his shift, he added more. He wrote about the patients he met, the stories they told him, the guilt he carried, the way he could not shake the sound of my cry when he shoved that knife beneath the table. He wrote about how his chest tightened whenever he thought of what he had done, how he saw now that I had never been exaggerating or playing weak or seeking attention, how easy it was to dismiss what he did not understand. He wrote that helping the patients forced him to face his own cruelty and ignorance like a mirror held too close to his face. But even as he wrote it all down, he tore up the pages repeatedly. Some nights he sat in his truck surrounded by crumpled paper scattered like snow, too angry at himself to finish, too ashamed to stop trying. Around the 4th month, he was assigned to assist with hydrotherapy, helping patients float in warm water to relieve muscle spasms. The first time he saw a patient cry from relief instead of pain, something inside him softened. It was the moment he finally stopped seeing the work as punishment and started seeing it as responsibility. A responsibility to every vulnerable person he had ever dismissed. A responsibility to me. His supervisor later told Marissa that he would often repeat a phrase under his breath during sessions as if trying to remind himself of something important. You do not get to choose who is worthy of compassion. During the last month of his service, he worked with a patient named Joy, a middle-aged woman whose nerve damage left her legs unreliable. She faced each session with quiet determination. When she learned about Caleb's charge, she did not recoil or judge. Instead, she looked him in the eyes and said, "Then make sure you never hurt another person again. Help people who live the way your sister lives. It will not erase anything. But you can build something new." Caleb nodded fiercely, tears rising again. At the end of each session, Joy would thank him and say, "Healing takes time. For everyone." On Caleb's final week, the staff signed his evaluation forms with overwhelmingly positive comments. Respectful, committed, teachable, trying. His supervisor added one last note. Change is real when it is consistent. His service had not erased anything he had done. It had not rebuilt trust. It had not healed my wounds or undone the trauma of that night. But it had changed him, forced him to face the ugliness inside himself with no excuses and no shortcuts. He finished the last page of the letter that night in his truck. No tearing it up this time, no running away. He folded the papers, carefully placed them in an envelope, and held it against his chest. He sat there for a long time, staring through the windshield at the dark Ohio sky, breathing with a heaviness that came from both regret and resolve. Finally, he whispered into the empty truck, "I have to face her. Whether she forgives me or not, I have to face her." And for the first time since Thanksgiving, he meant it. Caleb showed up at my apartment door on a gray morning in early December, the kind of morning where the sky hangs low and heavy like it cannot decide whether to snow or rain. I was not expecting anyone, so when the knock came sharp and uncertain, my stomach tightened with a familiar wave of caution. I wheeled myself closer, peering through the peephole, and froze. He looked thinner than I remembered, shoulders slumped beneath a worn jacket hair uncombed, eyes carrying an exhaustion that went far deeper than lack of sleep. For several long seconds, I simply stared at him through the narrow glass circle, unsure whether to open the door or pretend I was not home. But something about the way he stood there unmoving, clutching a thick envelope with both hands like it was the only solid thing he had left, pushed me to unlock the door. When it opened, he stepped back instinctively as if afraid of intruding. His voice cracked on the first syllable. "Rachel." I held onto the doorframe, keeping the barrier half closed between us. "What do you want?" He swallowed the sound rough. "I need to talk to you. Not argue. Not defend myself, just talk. His hands trembled as he extended the envelope toward me. I wrote something, a lot of somethings. I exhaled slowly, staring at the envelope but not taking it. You can leave it on the counter. He hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside only after I motioned to the small table near the entryway. He placed the envelope down gently, like it might break if he let go too quickly. Then he stepped back, hands hanging awkwardly at his sides. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I finally asked, "Why now?" His breath shuddered. Because I finally understand what I did. Not the charges, not the news, not the fallout. You. What I did to you. I waited, arms folded, bracing myself in case the conversation twisted into excuses like it always had before. But it did not. He looked at the floor for a long moment, then said quietly, "I hurt you. On purpose. And then I convinced myself you deserved it because that was easier than admitting how wrong I was." My throat tightened unexpectedly. He continued, voice low, "And then I watched people who didn't deserve their pain struggle to move an inch. I watched men cry because their nerves betrayed them. I watched women apologize for not being able to control their legs. I heard a teenager tell me she wished someone believed her, and I kept seeing you. That night, the way you fell, the way I accused you." My chest rose and fell in an uneven rhythm. He lifted his eyes, finally meeting mine. "I did not believe you because I did not want to believe you. Because if you were really hurting, then I was the kind of person who ignored your pain. And I guess I would rather believe you were lying than admit that about myself." For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt something inside me loosen just slightly, but not enough to call relief. I asked quietly, "Why stab me? Why that?" His face contorted as if the memory itself physically hurt. "I was angry and stupid and convinced you were embarrassing Mom. Convinced you were milking sympathy. When I felt your leg jerk, I thought it meant you were faking. Then I saw you on the ground, and instead of helping you, I doubled down. Because I did not want to be wrong." His voice cracked again. "I was wrong, Rachel. I was wrong in every way a person can be wrong." I closed my eyes for a moment. Hearing the admission spoken aloud felt surreal, as if I had stepped into someone else's life. When I opened them again, he was wiping his face with the back of his sleeve, embarrassed. He gestured toward the envelope. "Those are letters. Dozens. From patients, therapists, supervisors. People I have helped. People who told me things that changed me. And in the back are the ones I wrote to you. I did not read the ones I tore up. But these are the ones I finished." I studied him, trying to reconcile this trembling man with the one who had stood over me, shouting while I lay bleeding. Part of me wanted to throw the envelope back at him to demand that he feel the agony I felt on the hardwood floor. Part of me wanted to scream at him for arriving months too late. But another part, small but real, saw the truth. He had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably. He took a shaky breath. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for a fresh start. I am asking for humanity. The same humanity you asked for that night and I refused to give." My voice was steady when I spoke, though my heart raced. "I can forgive your ignorance, but not your cruelty." His shoulders lowered as if he had expected nothing less. I nodded toward the envelope. "But I will read what you brought." His lips parted, caught between relief and grief. "Thank you," he whispered. He turned to leave, but at the door he paused. "There is one more thing." He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket and placed it gently on the table beside the envelope. It was a list of every patient he had worked with and a statement describing what he had learned from each of them. Handwritten, raw, honest. I read their stories, he said, and I realized something. I never deserved your trust, but I want to learn how to be someone who could. He met my eyes one last time. "You do not owe me anything. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not even a conversation. But if someday you ever want to see who I am trying to become, you know where to find me." Then he left. I sat there for several minutes in the quiet, staring at the envelope, my leg throbbing softly beneath my blanket. I reached for the envelope with hesitant hands, It felt heavier than paper should. When I finally opened it, a single tear slid onto my wrist. The first letter began with 5 simple words. I finally see you, Rachel. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I let myself believe that maybe healing was possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. 2 years after the Thanksgiving night that tore my family apart, I found myself backstage at a conference center in Columbus, Ohio, adjusting the lapel microphone clipped carefully to my blouse. The room beyond the curtain buzzed softly with the murmurs of hundreds of people settling into their seats. The event banner read, Disability and Dignity Summit, and beneath it my name appeared on the schedule as a keynote speaker. Something I never imagined for myself while lying on the floor of my mother's dining room, gasping from pain and betrayal. As I waited to be introduced, I rolled my shoulders to ease the tension building along my neck. My wheelchair hummed quietly beneath me as I shifted my weight, grounding myself. The conference coordinator approached with a warm smile, whispering, "Take your time out there. People came because your story reflects their own." Her words sank into me like warm water, soothing yet overwhelming. When my name was announced, the applause rose in a wave that hit me unexpectedly hard. I pushed forward onto the stage, the bright lights washing over me in a soft, hazy glow. For a brief moment, I froze, eyes sweeping across the faces in the audience. Women with canes, men in wheelchairs, parents holding onto children with mobility braces, advocates, therapists, survivors, all of them watching me, not with judgment, not with suspicion, with recognition. I cleared my throat and began speaking. I told them about the night my brother stabbed my leg under the dinner table, the shock that jolted through my nerves, the fall onto the hardwood floor. I spoke about the disbelief in the room, the way people stared instead of helping, the dismissive words that echoed louder than the pain itself. I told them how the world treated invisible disabilities like optional tragedies, how families sometimes chose denial because it was easier than facing their own failures. As I spoke, the room stayed painfully quiet, each sentence landing with visible weight. I described the ER lights, the tremors, the fear that settled into my chest and refused to leave for months. I shared how recovery was not a straight line, but a loop of hope and frustration of progress, undone by setbacks of tears hidden behind bathroom doors. And then I told them about resilience. Mine, yes, but also theirs. I spoke about choosing to advocate for myself when the people closest to me refused to, choosing to stand emotionally even when my body could not, choosing to believe my pain mattered even when it made others uncomfortable. When I finished my speech, the silence held for a breath before applause swelled through the hall, rolling toward the stage like a warm tide. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears. My chest tightened with something that was not grief or fear, but a kind of quiet triumph. After the session ended, I remained near the stage greeting people who wanted to share their own stories. A woman in her 20s approached me first, her hands trembling slightly. She said, "My family says the same things yours did. They think I am exaggerating." Before I could respond, she broke down, tears streaking down her cheeks. I reached out and held her hands, steadying them in mine. "Your pain is real," I said gently. "Their denial is not your identity." She cried harder, and I let her, remembering how desperately I had needed someone to say the same to me. The next person was a middle-aged veteran who told me he had spent years hiding his nerve damage because his family called him dramatic. A grandmother shared that her sister had accused her of faking tremors. A man in his 40s whispered that he lived in constant pain but felt invisible in his own home. Each story poured out like water finally freed from a dam. It struck me then that what happened to me was bigger than a single violent moment. It was a symptom of something woven into society, a tendency to doubt suffering simply because it was not loud or obvious. Later that afternoon, after the session ended, I wheeled outside into the crisp December air. Snow had begun to fall in slow, gentle flakes, dusting the ground in a thin white blanket. The cold stung my cheeks, but the sensation felt grounding, almost cleansing. I listened to the muffled sounds of downtown traffic in the distance, while the world around me softened under the drifting snow. As I sat alone in the quiet, I thought about the long path that had led me here, the betrayal, the pain, the nights I wondered if I would ever feel safe again. And then the healing gradual as sunrise found in therapy community advocacy and the fragile courage of telling the truth aloud. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Caleb. Not long messages these days, just small updates delivered with care. Today it read, "I finished my certification class. Starting work tomorrow as a rehab aide. Hope you had a good day." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling an unexpected warmth. I typed back, "I spoke at a conference today. Your work helped someone once. Keep going." His reply came quickly. "I will, I promise." I put my phone away and lifted my head toward the falling snow. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not healed completely, not freed from every scar, but whole enough to move forward without fear that the past would pull me under again. The world around me shimmered with the soft glow of winter, and I pushed my wheelchair forward, wheels crunching gently against the thin layer of snow. As I moved across the courtyard, I whispered to myself the truth. I had fought years to finally believe I survived, and I chose to rise. If you feel comfortable sharing, have you ever been dismissed when all you needed was compassion?